Let me remind you of the context so far. Ruth is a young woman, but a widow as a young woman. She's from Moab. She's a Gentile, but she's moved to Israel with her mother-in-law, Naomi. They are both widows. They came to Naomi's hometown of Bethlehem. They came desperate, poor, vulnerable, and God showed up. With God's great providence, he led Ruth, this young woman, to work, to glean grain in the field of a man named Boaz, a single guy, a godly guy. God was all over this, guiding her to that field on that particular day that he showed up. They met. Sparks were flying. There's blushing going on as they talk. And Boaz really is taken by Ruth, and Ruth is smitten with Boaz. And we're enjoying the providential romance until it comes to a screeching halt. You know, sometimes guys don't have the guts to initiate the relationship developing any further. Sometimes guys, they need to ask a bold question, and they just freeze and they don't, and therefore it stalls. That's the case of what happened. It's been 3 months. It was the beginning of the harvest when Ruth showed up. It's now the end of the harvest. The harvest took 3 months, and Ruth is going crazy. She goes, I know he likes me. I think he likes me. I like him. Why won't he say anything? Well, part of the problem was that they were always in a group. Ruth was part of a group of women that were gleaning in Boaz's field. And every time Boaz came, they could talk, but there was always others that were part of the conversation and around. And so Ruth is saying it's a problem, Naomi. She's talking to her mother-in-law about the problem. And Naomi, a very smart, very strategic mother-in-law, has a plan. She sees the moment of opportunity. She identifies it, and she lays out a plan for her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Let's read what Naomi says. Here's Ruth chapter 3, verse 2. If you want to read along, you'll find the passage on page 265. These are the words of Naomi to Ruth. Verse 2 of Ruth 3. Tonight, Naomi says, tonight, Boaz will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. This is it. She says, you need to wash. You need to put on perfume. You need to get dressed in your best clothes and then go down to the threshing floor. All right, what's going on? Well, we're not farmers, most of us, and so I had to do some research on what is this winnowing and threshing floor, and here's what I've discovered. The harvest was a process. And the last step of the process is winnowing. You see, when you harvest grain or barley, wheat or barley, you have a mixture of the grain and the chaff. The chaff is kind of a leafy waste that's scooped up in the harvesting process. And winnowing is the means by which they separate the chaff, the unwanted part. They would scoop up the mixture and throw it in the air, and the wind would blow away the light chaff, and the heavier grain would fall to the ground. And so this was the final stage of preparing the grain. And when they were all done, they had a party. When they were all finished, traditionally the owner of the field, would pay for a great celebration with all of his workers. A job well done deserves to be celebrated. And this was the night of the celebration. And a lot of things happened on that night. For one, the owner, who's paying for the party, would be there, would be part of the celebration. And then when the party was all over, it was tradition that the owner and a few of his men would sleep at the site of the grain to guard it overnight. You have to understand, this finished separated grain would be like cash, very valuable. The next day they'd put it in bags and get it into a secured building, but for the night it was out in the open and they didn't want thieves stealing, and so the tradition was the owner and some men would sleep all night and guard. And Naomi is like, ooh, this guy's always scooting off to his house in Bethlehem. He's inaccessible. He's never alone. This is your chance in the cover of darkness to get alone with Boaz and have a much needed conversation. Wow. Naomi is bold. Yeah, you think Naomi's bold. Check out Ruth.